Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FieldView 22 webinar. We're excited for this year's release, which will be available to you actually later today, so look out for an email from us. In this webinar, we'll give you a full overview of all the new features in FieldView 22. Next slide. Some quick intros here. My name is Raja Alimuthu. I'm the FieldView Business Development Manager. Some of you may have talked to me. I'll be your host for today. Marie Lefebvre, he's our CTO and FieldView product manager. We'll be doing most of the heavy lifting today. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Marie for the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you. And hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Raja said, this is a very exciting time of the year when we get to reveal the work we've been working on for the new release and an exchange with you. So very exciting time. As Raja mentioned, we expect this version to be available later today on the customer portal. And as a start, here you have a quick list of the main features and improvements that we are adding to this new version that we are calling FieldView 2022. It's a slight change. We have the luck of having the version lining up with the year, so we are taking advantage of it and standardizing on the naming convention for the other products from TechPod as a company. And yeah, so I'm going to review these new features in this order. And as Raja mentioned, we have time at the end for the Q&A, but feel free to ask your questions as we go if you have any. So let's start right away. And I'll start actually by showing how FieldView behaved before this version 2022. And I'll talk about some improvements we've made to the data input workflow. So in the past, when you were reading your data, you had to go to File, Data Input, and then you were finding a type of cascade menu, a bit old-fashioned, that you had to come back to several times. Your preferred reader was kind of lost in a long list of readers. The cascade menu is by definition a bit error-prone. It's hard to not fall into another menu. And the settings for parallel and client server were kind of hidden in this menu as well. So we wanted to improve all of that in a single new feature. So what we did was to group all of it into a new workflow that I'm going to demonstrate right away. So let's go straight into this new version of FieldView. And as you can tell, it looks a lot the same. There's really only one change that is visible over here. It is this new icon over here for loading the data. It looks very similar to the one next to it that was pre-existing and has been moved one step to the right, which is still for opening a complete restart. But the new one is for loading your data and can also be accessed from File, Data Input. And as you can tell, we no longer have the long cascade menu. So if I open it, right off the bat, you can see that FieldView goes straight to the format I was using the last time. So if you're always using the same format, FVQNS in my case here, that's going to make it faster for you to go and read your data. And if I want to read my data set, I got my button right here at the top. I can select my data set and boom, I'm done with reading my data. You can also see that all options are available on this panel if I want to do something a bit different. And especially if I want to read this data set in parallel, all I have to do is click local parallel and do the same for reading my data set. And now it's been read in parallel. In the past, for historical reasons, we had multiple local parallel options. That's all been simplified to a single option that is going to use the best option available to you. So FieldView tells you over here the type of license you have. So I have a parallel 32 license. So FieldView can run up to 32 cores. But FieldView also sees that my laptop only has 16 logical processors. So it's going to use the minimum between those two numbers. So in this case, when I hit local parallel, FieldView runs on 16 cores on my system. So that's very easy to use, and all of that is automatic. If I want to read a different format, they're still all available from here at the top. We've got fuel list. For instance, I can go ahead and pick Plot3D. So the format changes a bit because we have more options for Plot3D with all the sub-variants over here. And as you can tell, FieldView also remembered that when I run in parallel and I have the option to use the auto partitioner, I want to use it. So that's something that is remembered from session to session. If you have access to the auto partitioner and you like the increased performance you get from it, you don't have to turn it on each time you want to use it. So yeah, going back to my slides over here, again, it's very much a simplification of the workflow. We want you to get to the same point of reading your data in fewer clicks. So last use format is remembered from session to session. The auto partitioner setting is also remembered, and you have a single local parallel option that is very visible on this panel that automatically adjusts to the number of MPI processes that you can run on your system and based on your license. So that's all very easy. We've done similar improvements to another section that is about the restarts menu. So if we look again at how it was before this version, you had to go to File, Open Restart, and File, Save Restart to find another bit confusing cascade menu that was, again, quite error prone. And you had to select in that cascade menu the right type of restart that you wanted to use. So all of that was a bit cumbersome, and we wanted to make it a bit easier. So let me again show you what it's like now, and we'll start by going into FieldView for a quick demonstration. Okay, so let me start fresh from a new session. And I'll start by loading a complete restart. So this behavior was not changed too much. I go over here to my shortcut. I can load a complete restart. So dataset is loaded, the view is created with all the objects. And yeah, let's say that then we're going to adjust the view a bit. Okay, I want to save this view if I like it. So I'll go to File, Save Restart. Again, no cascade menu anymore. I'll save that restart, and I can say which restart format I want to use. So we'll save a view that we'll call view 1. Okay. And then if I further adjust the view and I want to retrieve the previous view, I can go back to File, Open Restart. And here FieldView remembers that the last thing I did was to work with a view restart. I still have access to all the other formats, but this is more efficient than if I want to continue to work with view restarts. I can load back my view restart. So this behavior is true for these two entries, Open Restart and Save Restart. Remember what I've been doing last in terms of the type of restart files. But if instead I want to go straight to complete restart, I can hit the floppy disk over here and save directly a complete restart, or change the type of restart that I want to use. But the default from the two shortcuts, Open and Save a Restart, are always going to be the most commonly used, that is the complete restart option. All right, so coming back to my slides over here again, this idea of doing the same with fewer clicks. The last use restart format is remembered. If you go to File, Open Restart, and File, Save Restart, and you have a direct access to the complete restart from the two icons that you have in the upper left corner. So from these ease of use capabilities, let's move on to graphics improvements we've made in the field of Streamlines. It's interesting to see how many of our users are relying on the use of restarts. They are great to highlight flow structures For instance, here around the car, we can clearly see the separation happening at the back. We can see the flow going around this pod over here. But what often happens with streamlines, if you have a lot of them, is that they tend to obstruct the view. For instance, over here, it's really difficult to see the friction coefficient on the car. So what we did was to introduce a new display type, a new display option for streamlines with a customizable transparency that you can set for each group of streamlines. And it's fully customizable from 0 to 100% transparency. If we go look at how it works in a quick video. So here you have the setting. You can go by increments, or you can type in a value and it will automatically adjust to the closest increment. And you can see, well, I'll let you try that by yourself. I'm not sure how smoothly this video is going through GoToMeetings, but the technology we're using for these transparent streamlines is exactly the same as the technology we've been using for transparent surfaces. So you get the same performance, and it's going to be very smooth, interactive rendering on all graphic cards, really. We've made this new display attribute compatible with all streamline display types. So initially I was showing you ribbons. Now I'm showing you what we call the complete display type, which is really either a line, or when, like here, you activate the presentation rendering mode, you get a nice 3D tube, which with transparency to me looks very much like some smoke, that can be used, for instance, in a wind tunnel. So that's really a display type that I like a lot now. And the same is compatible with all the display types that you can animate. If we go for filaments, you can animate that as well. You can do filaments and spheres. Spheres will also be transparent. Filament and arrows, or just the spheres. And you can see that all of that works pretty well. Again, I'm not too sure how smoothly these animations are going through GoToMeeting, but you'll have very soon the opportunity to try that by yourself. And since we have transparent spheres, it was natural for us to extend that to particle paths as well, which, if you're not too familiar with it, is another menu for loading either particles that have been computed by your solver, or straight lines that you have computed in FieldView with a transient dataset. So again, the transparency setting is at the same spot that it's always been for surfaces. So it's going to be easy for you to find it. And to be honest, don't think as many users will take advantage of it for particles, because particles tend to come in front of each other, and so then the transparency doesn't necessarily work as well. If you have a large amount of particles, after a number of particles, you will not see through them anymore. So probably not as valuable as Streamlines as a new feature, but there was a very limited amount of work once we had done it for Streamlines, so we did it anyway for particle paths. Moving on, this time talking about new readers. As you understand, we have to stay up to date with the formats that solvers are using. And in this case, Fluent has made a significant change. They've been moving to their historical KStat format to a new format that they call CFF, which is now their new default. It is HDF5 based, so that's how you recognize the files, because they get the H5 extension on in addition to .cas and .dat. And the problem for us is that our legacy reader was incompatible with this format. So we had to work with Ansys. Through our partnership with them, we got access to their own SDK. So that means that we have full access to the data in the files. It's a full-featured reader right off the bat, with support for unsteady, for face-based results, for streamlines, wall marking, and so on. Very few limitations, the main one being actually coming from Ansys' own choice of not supporting Mac OS. So this reader is only going to be supported in FieldView for Windows and Linux, but if you're using Fluent, it's not available on Mac anyway, so it's unlikely that you're a Mac user. And to summarize the situation for our Fluent users, and we have three options as interfaces go. So the new .cat.h5.dat.h5 reader that is now at the in alphabetical order right after Ansys-CFX. We are following the new naming convention that Ansys is using for all of its readers. So it's going to be here, Ansys-Fluent CFF Reader. The former legacy reader is still available over here for all of your older files that you still want to be able to read in FieldView. And you also have the option to export from Fluent to the FieldView unstructured format, FVUNS. And this is actually the preferred option if you're after performance. The new reader is nice for having a quick view at an existing H5 format, but if you know you're going to read that case multiple times and want to get the best performance, we still recommend the FVUNS export, which is faster and compatible with FieldView Parallel. That's another thing I should mention in terms of limitations for this reader. The Ansys SDK is not compatible with MPI Parallel, so this reader is serial only, while the FVUNS export maintains the grid partitioning and so can be read in parallel in FieldView. Speaking of parallel, another improvement we've been working on is a new step in our auto partitioner. This is something that has been introduced in our previous release, FieldView 21. It's been made available to all customers with Parallel 32 licenses and above. And what it is something that will partition structured datasets, so the Plot3D and the Overflow readers benefit from it. And it's going to partition on the fly your grids so that you have the best possible load balancing for reading your case in parallel. So in a case like we are showing over here, a single grid with 200 million nodes, before FieldView 21, you could not read that in parallel because it was single grid. And with the auto partitioner, you get a speed up of reading it in parallel. And the same applies to datasets that are not well balanced, where you have some of the grids that group most of the nodes. The auto partitioner lets you split that on the fly during the read. So the improvement we've been doing going into FieldView 2022 is that we no longer expose the repartitioning operation to the user. So in the past, you will see that FieldView was creating additional grids as it was loading the data, and that was then affecting you for anything that is grid-based or IJK-based. That is, when you were creating a computational surface, for instance, you had to know the new grid number, and the IJK dimensions of that surface were also being affected. This is no longer the case in FieldView 22. When you use the auto partitioner, FieldView does everything under the hood, but the user doesn't need to know about it, and the grid numbering and the grid dimensions are now unchanged, which is very significant. So this is actually the feature that took most, the largest amount of resources in this new release, because as you can imagine, this is touching a lot of areas in FieldView. But that was definitely worth it for our customers who rely on the auto partitioner, because that makes the use of the auto partitioner really seamless, really transparent from when it's not being used. And yeah, then one slide to summarize other improvements that we've made. So I'll go a bit faster on those. We have a much smaller installation package now. Over the years, the FieldView package has been piling up some libraries that we wanted to provide for convenience. For instance, we had a version of Octave. We were bringing our own Python that was making our package a bit larger than it needed to, and also causing some liabilities in terms of the libraries that we were bringing and needed to stay up to date. So FieldView is becoming now a bring your own library or bring your own Python installation package. If you want to run FieldView in Python, that's still possible, but we are going to rely on the Python you have installed on the system. We've also deprecated the MPEG export. For several years now, FieldView has had a great MP4 export, which is really the recommended format for all videos. And for MPEG, we are relying on a very dated library. So we are killing two birds with one stone over here. We've also made an improvement to MyFVMPI, which is directly available to all users with Parallel 32 licenses and above. So a quick reminder of what MyFVMPI is. It gets between the FieldView client and its controller and the FieldView processes that are launched when you run in parallel. The idea is that FieldView will then be able to use any MPI you want to run with. FieldView comes with a version of OpenMPI, but if you have a cluster, it's possible that your HPC team has been optimizing a special version of MPI for your cluster. Maybe it is Intel MPI, maybe it is MPitch or another version of MPI. FieldView doesn't care. All you have to do is link MyFVMPI against your specific version of MPI, and FieldView will use it when you run in parallel. So again, the idea now is that the control of MyFVMPI is really enabled through licensing. We also have a lot of bug fixes and additional improvements, and all of that is fully described in our new set of the documentation manuals, and especially in the welcome to that is later today going to be made accessible through the FieldView website and the entire documentation as well if you go to the customer portal. Before we move on to the questions, just two new behaviors that I want to bring up. First, if you've been moving from FieldView 20 to FieldView 21 last year, you know you had to do a change with regards to licensing. FieldView 21 introduced LLM licensing, a different type of keys. Well, now is going to be when you benefit from this change. Because these keys are already compatible with FieldView 2022 that is going to come out today. The version number is no longer in the keys. This is controlled by the key expiration date or your maintenance expiration date. So if you have an annual key or if you have a perpetual key which is under maintenance, this information is contained in your key. And you just have to download and install FieldView 2022 to be able to run it. The same key that you're using now for FieldView 21 will run just as well. So it's a simpler operation to move to a new version. Also for our Windows user, we've changed where FieldView is being installed. So if you're looking for the manuals or for some example datasets, just remember that we are now installing FieldView 2022 under the TechPlot directory where all the products developed by our company are being located, including TechPlot 360 if you're also a 360 user, and LLM if you have the license server installed on your local machine. So all of that is now in the same directory. And yeah, with that, I've reached the end of my quick presentation. So I'll turn back to you, Raja, in case we have any question you'd like me to answer.
With that, yeah, we have a few kind of questions that came in even before the webinar started. Marie, will old restart files and scripts still work in the new version?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. We sometimes fail to remind it, but the answer is yes. We actually do a lot of work to make sure that your old restarts, old scripts, old programs all work right off the box with the new version. So that's called backward compatibility, and FieldView 2022, like previous versions, is fully backward compatible. So not only will those restarts and scripts work, but we make sure that they're going to give you the same image as well, which is a lot of work, but we understand that when you invest in this restart and these scripts, you want to be able to continue to use them, and that is the case, yes.
Okay, and then we have another question. I think it's just a question and a clarification on the data input menu was also simplified. I think there was maybe some confusion on that.
Yeah, so this whole file menu has been simplified. So you used to get a cascade over here, and now if you come over here, you have this data input panel that we use for all formats. It's been changed a little bit with the most important buttons being at the top now for reading your grid and your results. So if I go back to the heaviness format, I can read grid or combine, and I can read results once if I have a split format and I've already read my grid. So the most important buttons over here at the top. Otherwise, the format of that panel hasn't changed too much. We just brought in the settings for parallel and client server in this section. So these are, yeah, maybe I've been a bit quick on that, and I know it's a significant change because people have to load the data all the time for working with FieldView. But really, it's a matter of streamlining the process, and you'll find the same options. We are only getting you as they are faster with fewer clicks.
All right, thanks, Eva Marie. Next question here. Why FieldView cannot have the possibility to compute volume integrals, volume max, min, and average, and when will this option be available?
There's no good reason for the why. It's a matter of resources and feature requests. So FieldView has the ability to do surface integration. We have macros for doing using those for doing a method for volume integration. But then, if we we'll take note of the. I'm guessing you have the contact for that question, and so we'll take note of this feature request.
Yes, we'll make sure to follow up with you. Whoever asked that question, we have your name. Okay, and how do I get access to the auto partitioner?
Okay, so the auto partitioner is controlled by licensing. So default FieldView licenses allow you to run MPI with up to 8 processes. And then we have optional licenses for 32, 64, and more. So with any of these optional licenses, the higher end licenses for parallel, this enables the auto partitioner as well. So logic being that, for up to 8 cores, most of the time you don't really need to repartition your data. But then if you have larger systems with more cores, or if you want to run on multiple nodes on the cluster to get access to more memory, then it can become handy to repartition the data on the fly to really take advantage of those extra nodes. So it kind of goes hand in hand to enable the auto partitioner with the bigger licenses for the more heavy lifting of reading data on more cores and using more memory, getting access to more memory.
Thanks, Eva Marie. And then on my end, Raja again, if you want to try out a new version that's 32 or 64 cores, I'm happy to send you an evaluation copy. So if you want to try out the auto partitioner, please contact me directly. All right, and then some academic questions. Do we have academic licenses? And I think I can answer that one. We do work with the universities to not free academic licenses, but pretty heavily discounted licenses that we offer in a form of academic suite that has all our products. Again, we're all under the same roof now with TechPlot 360 and or with TechPlot. So the suite includes both FieldView and TechPlot 360. So if you're a student or affiliated with the university, we have that option for you.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, if customers have or attendees have more questions, they're welcome to reach out to me or Raja. It's same if you have feature requests. That was a very good one with the volume integration. I'm sure you have other things that you'd like to see in FieldView. So always feel free to reach out to us. It's not a commitment that we'll have the resources for doing it, but it's interesting to hear what you think should be done, and we'll get back to you in any case. And if we decide to work on it, then it's always useful to have users to exchange with to make sure we clearly understand the request. So, all right, yeah, thanks everyone for joining us for this webinar. And again, stay tuned. The new version will be available on our customer portal very soon.
Thanks, everybody.